thank you for participating with us today. We're meeting for the State Advisory Council for Gifted and Talented Education. My name is Natasha Menifee. I am the Guidance and Support Branch Manager here in the Office of Special Education Early Learning. I just want to take a moment to welcome everyone here, to thank you for your service and your time and your dedication to the students and family and districts of the GT students across the Commonwealth. I will take a moment to read our purpose for today's meeting. The State Advisory Council for Gifted and Talented Education is hereby created and attached to the Kentucky Department of Education. The Council's purpose is to make recommendations regarding the provision of services for gifted and talented students in Kentucky's education.
All right, thank you for that, Natasha. I'll go over our meeting norms. Welcome, everyone. Reminder, members must keep their cameras on. Members must speak when called on for roll call or any voting. The meeting is being recorded and live streamed. Remember to stay focused on the topic agenda, excuse me, at hand for sake of time in the hybrid environment. There is a raise your hand feature and chat can be used for questions. Additional feedback is provided through the meeting exit slip, and I'll put a link in the chat so that you can get that. Also email that link so you can provide your feedback. That does help us prepare for meetings. The secretary is taking notes, and I store and manage documents along with Kathy to help manage that. And remember, for folks on site, travel vouchers are collected at the end of the meeting and processed by our office. And we would like for these to be submitted by the end of the month so that we can make sure that you get your funds reimbursed. And so Kathy and I can take those at the end of the meeting or just email those to us at the end of the month. Laura Earls is helping us manage that as well. And we really appreciate Laura's help. All right, so I will turn it over to our secretary, Tim Travis, to review the previous meeting minutes. Thank you, Tim.
Good morning. I believe everyone received a copy of the meeting minutes. Is there any discussion prior to approving the minutes? Okay, and who can call for the vote? Do we have someone that would step in place of Dr. Roberts to call for the vote?
Yes, Kathy's going to fulfill that role.
Right. So Dr. Roberts said she's having some trouble. She says she doesn't have an account. Could Rebecca Atkins help her with that? She our support person today.
Yeah, I will try to email somebody.
Okay. Okay, great.
Is there any discussion on the minutes?
Yes, Tim, I can do that. Also, Jeff, get a chance we get to have a roll call. So should we step back and do the roll call and then do the minutes, or do you want to move forward?
Oh, yeah, that's right. We need to do the roll call, don't we?
Yeah. Tim, can you step back just a second and do the roll call?
Looks like Dr. Roberts might be in.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Hey, Dr. Roberts.
Well, I can get in on my phone, but I can't on my laptop. So here I am.
Okay. All right. Thanks for being with us today, Dee. Do you want to just begin? We're just now starting if you want to do the roll call.
Actually, why don't you go ahead with the roll call?
Okay. Go ahead, Kathy.
I can do that. All right. So I'm going to call everybody out. You just say you're here or whatever. All right. Katie Booth.
Here.
John Deidre Bradford. Lindsay Burton. Okay. Kimberly Code.
Here.
Thank you. Brandy Corbin.
Here.
Thank you. Byron Darnell.
Here.
Mason Dyer.
Here.
Hannah England.
Here.
Kirk Payne.
Yeah.
Emily Lawson. Here. Jean Lee,
Here.
Tiffany Marshall, Brenda Martin,
Here.
John Maxey, Kim Nettleton,
Here.
Julia Roberts,
Here.
Timothy Travis.
Here.
Did I get everybody? Great. Okay. We're all here and accounted for then. Joe?
All right. Thank you. We can go back to our previous meeting minutes now, review those and approve. And as Tim mentioned, these were sent to members in advance. And we would ask for a motion, a second, and then we'll do discussion after that. So Kathy, I'll let you, Dr. Roberts, I'll turn that back over to you now.
Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
And that's you, Kim?
That was Lindsay.
That was Lindsay. Hi, Lindsay. I can't see people on a phone, so I'm sorry. You'll have to just tell me who's doing this. And is there a second for the minutes?
Second.
And now, what discussion do we have? Do we have additions or changes to the minutes? Hearing none, let's vote to approve. And how do we do that online? Do we do that by calling the roll or just show of hands?
Yeah, you can just go down.
Okay, Kathy, would you do that roll call?
Sure. I'd be glad to.
Thank-
All right. Katie Booth,
Yay.
Lindsay Burton,
Yay.
Code,
Yay.
Randy Corbin,
Yes.
Mason Dyer,
Aye.
Hannah England,
Yay.
Kirk Haynes,
Aye.
Kelly Lawson, Jean Lee,
Yay.
Pauline Covington,
Yes.
Tiffany Marshall, Bryn Martin,
Yay.
Kim Nettleton,
Yay.
Julia Roberts,
Yay.
Tim Travis.
Aye.
And the minutes stand approved as submitted. The next thing on the agenda is to review the committee reports. The Bylaws subcommittee has met since the last time, and you have the recommendations that emanated from our earlier meeting. Once again, I think maybe we could start out with an approval for a motion to approve the bylaw subcommittee report. Get a second, and then we would discuss it. I kind of think that can come out from the committee as the start for this, and get a second from the group. Second, anyone?
I'll second.
So what would you like to discuss related to the bylaw subcommittee report?
right, Dr. Roberts. Who was the person who seconded?
I think it was
Kimberly.
Kim Middleton.
Thank you.
No, it was not you, Kim. It was.
It was the other Kim.
Kimberly.
It was Kim Code.
Kim Code, sorry about that.
That's okay. I'll
I
take
think-
credit.
I think I'm in a struggle with doing this on the telephone, but anyway, bear with me.
That's okay.
Made the motion to approve the bylaws or to, made a motion.
I think it's okay with parliamentary procedure for that to come from the committee as the motion.
So are you making that motion, Dr. Roberts?
I think yes, it's coming from the committee. Yes,
Just wanting to make, verify for the minute.
sure.
Sorry to interrupt. Thank you.
Now, are there any discussion?
You may think we've talked about the bylaws enough.
So I think the only thing we added when we met in our committee was there were comments from council members about the Article 4, I believe, Section 2, select chairperson and vice chairperson. We had some discussion there whether or not to move that meeting to the beginning of the year or the end of the year. And we decided in committee to keep that as it was. And we talked about that. We had a very short meeting. And then there was also at the very end on what for me is page 7, it's Article 8, the bylaw amendment. There was a council member there who suggested that we needed to talk about, what majority of the council members were needed to make an amendment to the bylaws. And so we made that as 3/4 of the voting membership. And I believe that was all that we added in addition to the original changes that were made.
Is there any further discussion? If not, let's vote on accepting the bylaws as presented by the committee. And Kathy, once again, would you poll the group?
Sure, I'll be glad to do that. Katie Booth,
Yay.
Lindsay Burton,
Yay.
Kim Code,
Yay.
Brandy Corbin,
Yay.
Mason Dyer,
Yes.
Hannah England,
Yay.
Kirk Haynes,
Yay. I have a question at the end of the vote.
Emily Lawson, Jean Lee,
Yay.
Pauline Lorenzo Covington, sorry, Pauline,
Yay.
Ren Martin,
Yay.
Kim Nettleton,
Yay.
Julia Roberts,
Yes.
Timothy Travis.
Aye.
Okay. That'd be 14 nays, 0 no's. Okay.
So Kirk, what would you like to ask or add?
On the copy that I'm looking at, it's just a typographical error. It says November 2017. Should we change that to April 2022? Since we're making significant revisions.
Sounds like an appropriate suggestion.
Thank you for noted.
We also have been talking about the priorities of the group with the subcommittee making some suggestions. And I wasn't able to participate in that, so I'm going to suggest maybe Kathy, you update us on what that group did.
Sure. I I'm glad to. So it was Jean Lee and myself and Joe. And during that meeting, we looked through the transcript of the last meeting to know what council members had suggested for changes. And so you'll see, if you've got a copy of that the changes are highlighted in yellow. And so there was a recommendation that we change the wording to priority 1 to be added. Recommend that the KDE support districts in identification practices and services was a key change that had not been in there, that are equitable for all students, including those who are twice exceptional, English learners, students associated with racial and ethnic groups, all socioeconomic students, and students with special considerations, to remove barriers for equal opportunity and access. So those were the changes that were made to the priorities as they were before. Those were the suggestions that were made as we looked at the transcript of the meeting from November the 17th.
So would someone make a motion that we accept this recommendation from the subcommittee? And we'll discuss it after we have a motion and a second.
Bryn Martin, motion that we accept the report from the committee.
And a second?
I second it.
So
Kim
would I have it right with Kim Nettleton this time?
Yes,
So what discussion do you have of the recommendation?
This is Kimberly Code this time. One small tweak where it says all socioeconomic students, could we flip that and make it people first language, where it's instead perhaps students from all socioeconomic backgrounds?
Sounds like a good suggestion. Any other suggestions? Well, Kathy, would you call for a vote on this motion with the amendment included?
Yes. Katie Booth.
Aye.
Lindsay Burton.
Aye.
Kimberly Code.
Yes.
Brandy Corbin.
Yes.
Mason Dyer. Hannah England.
Aye.
Kirk Haynes.
Aye.
Emily Lawson.
Aye.
Jean Lee.
Yes.
Paulette Covington.
Yes.
Bryn Martin.
Yay.
Kim Nettleton.
Yes.
Julia Roberts.
Yes.
Timothy Travis.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Well, I hope you all share my happiness in getting the bylaws and the priorities set. It's taken us a long time to do that. So now, I'm not being in the same room, it's hard. I presume that Nicole Fields is there. Is that correct?
Yes, she's here. She's ready.
Here.
Well, she is here to talk about a really important issue for everyone in education, including those in gifted education and talent development. And she will provide an update on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Welcome, Nicole.
Good morning, everybody. How are you? Hope you're doing well. I am going to share my presentation. And we will begin. Can everybody see it?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm Dr. Fields. I am the Community Engagement Coordinator for the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Department within Kentucky Department of Education. I started March 1st, and it has been a roller coaster that has been so much fun to ride, meeting different stakeholders throughout the state of Kentucky. So I'm happy to be here to talk to you about DEIB and why this work is important. And let me say that DEIB is not just a checkbox, a destination. It is truly a journey. So this morning, I want to take you on this journey with me. So our learning targets today, I want to make sure that you understand the definitions of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And I want to introduce our stakeholders to new resources and strategies that we are actually working on and doing in DEIB. First, we have regional cooperative agents, is what I like to call them, within our co-ops. We have 8 of them and 8 co-ops. And Commissioner Glass actually wrote a really nice, in his commissioner's weekly newsletter, a write-up about our regional co-op folks. So there they are. A couple of them have 2. We just recently added Malika Williams to the position of special education early childhood. I actually met her yesterday. She's a great person to add to our team. So we are working with all of Kentucky on this work. So let's define diversity. It is the individual differences as our personalities, our learning styles, and our life experiences in groups, social differences, racial ethnicity, socioeconomic, class, gender, sexual orientation, etc., that can be engaged in the service of learning. When we talk about diversity, oftentimes people want to think that it's just race. It's not. So that's the key thing when it comes to diversity, is the individual differences and all the things that encompasses. So we have 3 core questions we like to ask. How can we celebrate diversity in KDE? We do that with equity. And as Commissioner Glass has stated, and this is from him, that equity in education is fundamentally an effort to ensure that all of our students have the support they need to meet our academic standards and to reach their full potential as students, citizens, and human beings. An equity focus in education recognizes that public school students come to us with a variety of backgrounds, needs, supports, and experiences, and that we must take in account when we consider the education of each child. We all have gone through this pandemic, and everyone is impacted differently. So we have to make sure that we are going with this, even with gifted and talented, we have to be equitable when we're working with our students. It is not a one-size-fits-all approach. Our second core question is, what are some examples of how KDE is providing equitable access to our stakeholders? We do this by inclusion. Inclusion is the intentional act of creating an environment that fosters mutually respectful relationships in which each student, regardless of their intellectual, social, cultural, and geographical background, is welcomed, supported, and valued as fully participating members of our society. Commissioner Glass says a radical inclusion. As he states, I go into this concept of a radical inclusion, meaning that we go out of our way to identify individuals and groups who are typically outside our conversations and decision-making processes and create support and intentional structures to involve them. I know within Gifted and Talented, we are always striving to find those marginalized groups of folks that perhaps we don't necessarily think about first, but we want to show that we're doing a radical inclusion, as he says, and create supports and intentionality to involve those students. Core question number 3, how do we create support, radical inclusion at KDE? And this is where the B comes in, it's belonging. To the degree which learners believe, experience, and feel that they are accepted and respected by adults and peers as valued contributors in their learning and social environment. Everyone wants to feel like they belong, and it's important that we strive to do that. And one of the ways we do this work is by providing a multi-tiered system of support. And this is our Kentucky Equity Toolkit. And within this puzzle piece, One of the key things I want to talk to you about today is our equity dashboard. And I'm going to let our commissioner, Deputy Commissioner, Chief Equity Officer Thomas Wood Tucker talk to you for a few seconds about it. So,
hello, I'm Dr. Thomas Woods Tucker, Deputy Commissioner and Chief Equity Officer at the Kentucky Department of Education. I'm extremely proud to introduce you to the Equity Dashboard suite of visualizations, a tool created to support schools and districts as they consider data points through an equity lens. This dashboard will help teams identify groups of students who are at risk of being over or even underrepresented in different areas like chronic absenteeism and advanced coursework using an easy-to-understand color-coded system. The dashboard is designed to offer a big-picture look that will help schools and districts identify areas needing further attention. KDE defines equity as the promotion of access, opportunity, and advancement of all individuals, including those in underserved communities, in order to identify and eliminate conditions that prevent the ability of all students to reach their full potential. Assessing school and district equity is about more than just identifying challenges and offering recommendations. It is also about creating an intentional, ambitious, and urgent path forward for Kentucky districts to improve outcomes for all students. When we say all students, it is with the understanding that each student comes to the district with unique and valid needs for learning, that there are students in often marginalized groups that require our attention and intervention in ways that address specific opportunity gaps, and that the ways in which we seek equity for one student improves our ability to sustain equity for all students. Equity provides for students to be seen and to see themselves and their lived experiences in the learning environment, inclusive of gender, race, ethnicity, gender identity, and ability. The remainder of this video will orient you to the equity dashboard so that your team can begin utilizing this powerful tool to identify areas of inequity and problem solve how to ensure all students reach their full potential. I'm very excited to see what we can accomplish together as we walk this path towards equity for all.
One take. So I'm not sure if I believe that, but he said he did the video in one take. So what is it? We heard him talk about that the Equity Dashboard is a program that takes data from the district through Infinite Campus. Where is it located? Again, it's within Infinite Campus. It pulls the data that I'm actually going to walk you through a little bit so you can see. And you can access your data today from your districts. What groups are compared? The dashboard compares two groups, a variety of demographic groups and their corresponding non-group. So for example, if we're looking at Hispanic students, we'll compare them to non-Hispanic students. If we're looking at homelessness, we'll look at homeless students compared to non-homeless students. On the right, you'll see the racial ethnicity groups that we track and that we pull from, and the other student groups that can be viewed in the equity dashboard as well. When utilizing the equity dashboard, we teach a 4-step problem-solving process to get down to the root cause analysis. And one of the ways you do that is often asking the 5 whys. You come up with a question you're interested in, a problem statement, and you ask yourself why 5 times. Children in our community are not ready for kindergarten. Why? Not all children in the community are going to high-quality preschools. Why is that? There are not enough high-quality preschools in our community. Why is that? Preschool staff need additional training and education to provide high-quality preschool education. Why? Professional development opportunities are not available for preschool staff. Why? Community colleges do not offer training and professional development opportunities for staff. This is just one example of how to utilize the 5 whys, but whatever it is for your particular schools and districts that you work with, it's great to utilize this tool. Again, the first step you have to decide in the problem that is identifying the problem. And from there, you can utilize that to use the data to come up with the 5 whys and utilizing the equity dashboard. You can look at academic and non-academic benchmarks as well. So let's take a look at the equity dashboard. The orange colors are the ones that we look at to see that there's a gap, there is an issue there. And then the blue are not. So let's look at the out of suspension, which is the bottom left-hand side. As you can see, we have Black students over here on the right, isolated by themselves, and then students with 2 or more races have a higher level. This data, when we're actually in the data equity dashboard, if you click on it or hover over it, a box will populate and it tell you what that means. So in this particular data point, there are about 5,000 out of 73,000 Black students that receive out of school suspensions compared to their 12,000 non-Black students receiving out of school suspensions. Black students are 3.35 times as likely to be receiving out of school suspensions as their non-Black students. This student group is overrepresented in this category. Let's look at in-school suspensions. In-school suspensions are here. And I wish that we would have moved the screenshot over a little bit. But as you can still see, if we compare Black students to non-Black students, as you can see here in this particular picture, Asian students and white students, Black students are still 2.7 times likely to receive an in-school suspension as their non-Black peers. Again, this student group is overrepresented in this category. As we look at academic proficiency in Kentucky, what do you see in our data? What is it telling us? If you look at it, our marginalized students are underrepresented in a lot of these categories when it comes to reading, English, science, and math. When we do this equity dashboard training and we show them this data, particular to their group, the next thing we do is an equity data walk. And this allows them to walk around and visualize, well, look at the data, and then ask them the 5 whys. Why do you think this is happening? And this gives you a real quick video of what I'm trying to explain here. So we look at context before we look at content. It's important to note that the Kentucky Department of Education's equity dashboard should be extremely helpful to educators. Context matters, and to this is not only data that district and school leaders should consider. We're actually doing a book study with a book called Street Data, and it talks about context with our DEIB internal team within KDE. We're doing it with our district leaders, and we're doing it with our regional co-ops. Because there is a voice that comes from the data. Sometimes numbers can't tell you the full story, and it gives you that human interaction. When we look at data right now, just from the pandemic, a lot of it looks bad. But when we talk to students and families and community stakeholders and ask them, what was your experience? We get to dig deeper, and it gives us a chance to really get down to some of those whys. It allows us to honor their voices and their experiences when we're looking at the data. This basically says, so when we look at data, it's not really about, we have to stop with this self-serving narrative of fixing and filling, but really trying to get a better understanding of it. It offers us to have social emotional learning is one of the things that we utilize as well. And when we're talking to our stakeholders about the data that we see, we try to make sure we look at it from a trauma-informed lens, because sometimes it doesn't tell us the true story once we just look at numbers. Sometimes we have to ask those questions. Right now in Kentucky, we are working with a team to create more best practices when it comes to social emotional learning, because social emotional learning, ultimately, it's the whole child. And we are working with our regional co-ops, our district leaders as well, and we have a team that is working on this to look at climate culture. DEIB is involved, early childhood, because ultimately, again, we want to take this document that we're creating for recommendation into law. I'm happy to work with Heather Bushelman. She is over all the counselors in Kentucky, and she works with us to have a statewide school counseling professional learning opportunity. We often, before I was in this role, I was a school counselor, and I loved going to the counselor conferences and the Kentucky School Counselor Summit because they always had amazing presenters that helped me be better in my practice. And this is what is offered. And oftentimes she has these once or twice, sometimes every other month. It depends on the opportunity she wants to have. But it's great that we have these opportunities for counselors to learn and take them back into their practices. So we do that. We have the Kentucky Academy of Equity and Teaching, and we want to make sure that we're providing opportunities for our teachers and all of the educators to inspire, prepare, and educate our students. One of the things that we did in DEIB to help with this narrative of what we're doing is making sure that we were accessible. We have a new website, and if you click on it from KDE, it'll take you right there. You'll see that the equity toolkit's there, the dashboard. It gives you definitions, the ones that I just showed you, and it talks about us, and you see our team. That's our team there. And that's Heather I was talking about. And this is Dr. Chang. She's our strategic analyst, and that's me. We utilize the individual learning plans and it's tied into the high school graduation requirement. The students actually start working on their ILPs in middle school, but we tie them into their graduation requirement because we want them to graduate college and or career prepared. So this allows them to really work out plans on how they want to move forward. We do this by putting it in their Google Classrooms, and we have what is called Individual Learning Plan Playbooks. This is a site in which it has lessons that you can utilize when you're teaching students about where they want to go in the future, because not all students want to go to college, not all students want to pursue a career. So we have to figure out what is best for that individual student, and this is how we utilize that. One of the things I'm happy about that within the state of Kentucky, that we have funding where no more than $10 will be charged for advanced placement exams. This is key, especially for students who are may receive free or reduced lunch, that there's funding for them, that if they want to take the AP exam, no one does not have to pay more than $10 for the school year. So that's pretty awesome. We want to bring people with us on this journey. Again, that I said that we have an internal KDE team. We're actually doing the street data book study. There are 2 people from each offices in KDE. We meet monthly. We also have our bi-weekly meeting with our regional co-ops. We've added 1 new coordinator for special ed and early childhood. That's Malika Williams. The 2 consultants in our division at KDE, that's myself, Dr. Fields, and Dr. Chang. And then we have our monthly learning opportunities that we have with the district DEIB officers and our coordinators. And those are all the districts that are currently involved. And then we've tapped into the Commissioner Student Advisory Council. I'm excited to be able to work with them, and they're helping us on our next project that I'm talking about next. Right now, we're working with the Kentucky Education Television, KET, to work on asynchronous modules that educators can take to receive micro-credentials. And we're looking for requests for proposals for live coaching on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging for our co-ops, districts, and schools. What we have left to do is really create a community stakeholder advisory council for our DEIB for strategies and priorities. We're going to begin again with requests for proposals for those 6 asynchronous modules. I'm excited to be working on the podcast. I will help lead that, myself and our team. It's going to be student driven, so I'm working with the Commissioner's Student Council to get their voice on how to really move this work forward, because they have voices and we should allow them a platform. And we're also working on a monthly newsletter for all the stakeholders in Kentucky to talk about what great work we're doing in DEIB and why it's important. And as I stated in the beginning, DEIB is not a destination or just a checkbox that I did it. It is a journey, and that we have to ensure that we are providing a diverse, equitable inclusion and belonging to all our stakeholders in the state of Kentucky. I am Dr. Fields, the Community Engagement Coordinator for KDE. That is my Twitter handle, and I thank you this morning for allowing me the time to talk to you about the great work we're doing in DEIB.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Field. You're doing the work that lots of us are trying to do within our universities and schools.
Thank you.
You're talking about so many important ideas that are up front in gifted education and talent development as we look at equity, as we look at opportunities to make sure social emotional learning is in place. I'm sure there are people in this group who have questions for you. Are you available to answer questions now?
Yes, I can. Any
In
questions for me?
our group, who has a question or a comment you'd like to make?
Hi, this is Bryn Martin. I'm in northeastern Kentucky.
I was looking, like the boxes are like moving. So good
I
morning.
know, I'm down here. Oh, okay, thank you so much for a very informative session. We appreciate that, and the insights, I think, really were spot on. I'm just wondering, what are we doing in terms of looking at measurements? Like, how do you measure how well you're providing what's needed and making those assessments? What kind of tools are in place aside from looking at bottom line test results or surveys of how well they feel they are belonging? Are there some other measurements in place?
Well, that's the reason why we're doing street data, because it looks at qualitative data, which is providing that voice. Because we can't, in order to be equitable, we have to use quantitative and qualitative. Yes, we can look at K-Prep scores and we can look at data, and we utilize the equity dashboard to help us give us the information to know where to start. For example, we went to a school, there was a situation, and we were able to talk to teachers and students and, provide them. We created a quick needs assessment and survey for them to do. So we constantly follow up to ensure that their voices are heard and they're making the changes that need to be there. It is a evolving process, so we don't have a one tool that we're using. So we're constantly tweaking that as we go along. But it's not just looking at one set of data. It is looking at all points. So that goes back to, again, that context of what we're looking at. So if I'm looking at the K-Prep scores and the scores are bad for a particular school, I want to know why. It could be, they had a lot of movement, a lot of students transitioning out. So if a kid is constantly moving, as we know, that is a barrier. So how can we help support their family? So they may be going in talking to the counselors in the Friskies or the advisory team and really trying to figure out how we can help move that needle. That does take time because we have 174 counties in Kentucky, and there is currently 4 of us internal and 12 regional co-ops. So it just really depends on that particular situation. So we don't have just one tool, we utilize many, but I'm hoping that we can eventually get to creating one tool that we can use. But we really want to focus on that context of why that number is like that. And we just take a variety of approaches to figuring out if what we're doing is helping to change that narrative. And we can go back and reassess again and see if we see any changes. I don't know if I answered your question. I feel like I did, but I'm not sure.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
And later I would look forward to maybe if you could share some information about the tools that you use. But we could do that later. But thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Ms. Martin, where are you out of? I'm sorry, I'm trying to write your name down so I can follow up with you.
Okay. Oh, me, Bryn Martin. I'm out of Greenup County, and if there's a place here, I could put my email.
Okay.
in. Okay.
I'll put mine in the chat too, so you can email me.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other comments, questions? It's a great opportunity to share ideas with Dr. Field.
I have a comment. This is Paul Covington, and I'm in person in the Frankfurt building. I just wanted to express my appreciation for the work that you're doing, because as a teacher, we always want to look at the qualitative data.
Mhm.
So many of us talk about how tired we are of standardized tests, and we understand the value of data points and the importance of recognizing the outliers. But knowing that KDE, through your guidance, is really digging deep and looking at qualitative data is refreshing and hopeful.
Thank you. And that's ultimately what we want. I agree with you. Yes, the data is important and we value it, but sometimes we want to know the voice behind the numbers, like just to really make it make sense, the whole picture. So that's a part of belonging. There's issues with that. So we want to make sure that we're equitable with our approaches when it comes to what we're looking for and how to utilize that data. So thank you for that. But we're constantly having that lens of context before content.
Kirk, do I see a hand up?
Yes, good morning. Thank you for your presentation, Dr. Fields. Is there, I don't see a link on our agenda. Is there a way that you could share?
I did. I shared it with, I emailed it to.
That was a lot of really good information in a short period of time.
I know, and I talk fast. I emailed it to Joseph.
Okay.
Yes. Kathy and I provided some more information.
Okay. I sent him the email right before I presented so he can share it with the group, but I can, if he can share it, if not, I can reshare it. It's fine.
I would just like to look at it later.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hannah, do you have a question or comment?
Yes, hi, this is Hannah England from Russell County, South Central Kentucky. And thank you so much for presenting today. I really appreciate it. But I was really excited to hear when you mentioned about the AP exams, no more than $10. And yes, and I'm excited, and I'm assuming, but I didn't want to assume that, is this information that all high school counselors are aware of?
Should be aware of it. If not, we'll make sure we push that back out there. Heather Bushelman has done a phenomenal job of communicating in her monthly emails to the counselors about all of the changes and all the resources that are out there. But I will make sure that she resends that out again, but the counselors should be aware of that. She's on spring break this week, but I'll make sure that she gets that information and resends it. But yes, even before I came here, I was receiving the information. I was a high school counselor, so I was aware of it. So yes, they know that. We can send it again. No worries.
Do you foresee that being something? I know I had written down, you said for this school year. Do you see that being foreseeing that being in the next school years?
I do not know. If I had all powers, I was like, yes, we would do that. But I don't have that liberty to say that. So I will say I don't know currently. I'll put a pin in that and I will let you know as soon as I can ask maybe Dr. Woods Tucker, he may have an answer. But right now, this school year, $10.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And that is such an important piece for our students in order to encourage them to take the AP exam. That's really good news. I don't see any other hands up. You don't have to put your hand up. You can speak out.
Oh, okay. If someone that wants to go, because I could do this all day. So, okay, two quick questions. One quick follow up on that, and I'm sorry if you already said it, but for the $10 testing, is that no matter how many times you opt to take it, and do you have the option of taking it more than once, or?
I think this is a one-time fee that we can pay for that. I will follow up with that. I don't want to misspeak and say that. I will follow up on that because I'm not clear on that for myself, but I will follow up on that, how many times they can do that.
Okay. And my next question dealt with injury and personal trauma. You mentioned that you tried to include that. And I'm just wondering, how well can you measure your assessment of that if people aren't necessarily forthcoming? And how much room do counselors have to make their own interpretations? For example, there was a lot of research showing that during COVID, especially, there was more abuse. And if people weren't able to see the students and to get in and really talk to the students one-on-one, then how can we tell how harmed were our students during that time? Or did we have something to show what our numbers look like in terms of that?
Well, let me say this. Before I came to this position, I worked at a very high needs high school, and we had a total of 8 students that passed away through COVID, and it was not COVID related. So our students experienced a lot of trauma. And I will say it's not just the counselor. As a counselor myself, it's a conversation that I constantly have with my teachers, my principals, everyone in my building, all the way down to the custodians, about being trauma sensitive. And one of the things that we have done in our department, and before we start moving forward with our regional co-ops, is that everybody was trauma trained to make sure they understood how to go in and do this work with a trauma informed lens. In the role that I had previously, when we had students that came in and they were not always forthcoming, it comes down to building relationships with those students and providing a welcoming environment. I work closely with my Family Resource Center coordinator, in which we will do home visits with families. Sometimes it was the bus driver that had a better relationship with the student, and having that opportunity for the bus driver to filter the information to me so I can do what I needed to do to ensure that I'm getting the family what they need, working with the Family Resource Center or Youth Service Center coordinator. Sometimes it's working with the assistant principal. It is having a team. And one of the things that we strive to do as counselors, create a student support team. And that is not just us. It's a village of people within the building, and it also has community stakeholders involved in it as well. So within my particular school, we worked with a church that was right next door. And one of the great things that they did during the pandemic is because, students were not allowed to come into the school, but the church was able to provide Wi-Fi. They could actually go in if the Chromebooks didn't work, and they could go over there and do their student assignments. They also were able to provide meals and services. Within the county that I had, we were actually doing meal pickup twice a week at the school. While we were volunteering, sometimes as counselors, I would go to the school that I belong to so I could see my families to say, hey, how are you doing? We were masked up and, all that. But for me, was important that they saw me, even though you saw me on the screen, but you got a chance to see me as I'm handing you a meal to say, hey, how are things really going? And having those conversations. So that's one of the things, again, that each school is unique on how they do that. It is not a cookie cutter approach of every school should do this. Every school looks different because what was happening at my school, yes, it was tragic, but it was not happening to the school that was happening right up the street 5 miles from my school. So they had a different approach. But having a trauma lens allows you the flexibility to provide resources for families. And another thing that we did in my building is when the students did come back, we did not teach content the first 7 days. We worked on social emotional learning the first 7 days. We went over expectations and really trying to build that family and give them the opportunity. And we had crisis counselors there to come in. We were in the hallway. I was never in my office because in the hallway, kids who are constantly coming out for the restroom, they're not always going to the restroom. Sometimes they're just in there, just having a moment. So that allowed me the chance to say, she's always coming out of class. What's going on with her? And pull them aside and have conversations. So that's just a couple examples of how you do that. And one thing about Heather Bushelman, even myself as a previous counselor, we work with counselors. I was a Family Resource Center coordinator for 5 years. I'm great with the Friskies and working with them and, you know, showing them how to create those student support teams in your buildings and involving the community as well to help families. And they'll be more forthcoming when they feel like they belong and they can talk to someone in that building.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Yes.
You're so welcome. And that's one of the things I'm doing in my role as the community engagement coordinator is really working with all of our schools and all of our counties about how to get the community involved and give that more wraparound approach. We have the students 6 or 7 hours a day, but then they go home into environments that may not be the best. But when we have the community support, there's another person there they can go to after hours. And then they're communicating with us and we're communicating with them. Just have a fluid conversation. And showing people how to do that will ultimately help every student in Kentucky.
And one more, if I can't follow up, if someone else didn't want to hop in. Okay, now how are we looking at that vis-a-vis the discipline strategies? Because a lot of times when people are having these personal problems, they tend to act out and you have more discipline problems, and then they get shoved down the wrong track of having that dealt with without dealing with the source. So what are we doing to look at that? Are we looking at incidents of discipline problems and trying to reconcile and see if that could be the symptom of more trauma that the kids could be experiencing at home?
I think the first thing we have to do is educate folks on what trauma looks like. And that is part of what we do in DEIB is really teaching people what does it look like? You know, is it equitable to say that this kid is acting up, that he deserves a consequence, and not really understanding the context of what happened? And each school does it differently. And we look at the equity dashboard, which is one thing I love, and that's the quantitative piece to look and see what students are overrepresented and underrepresented in these categories. So if I go and I pull up just Boone County because it's on my brain this morning, and I look at a school in Boone, I don't know a school in Boone County, I'm just going to name it Fields Elementary. Fields Elementary has overrepresentation of African-American girls that have been suspended, and I see the other students are way below. I want to know what is going on. So I can call and talk to counselors or go in, and like we did this one particular school, we went in and we had conversations with teachers. We were talking to students like, you know, what's going on in the building? And they were very forthcoming and honest about what they saw. And then it becomes our job to make sure we are working with the team in that particular building to address what the real issue is and that we're doing it equitably to make sure that students have a voice, the teachers have a voice, admin have a voice, and how we can change this narrative within the building. But the equity dashboard is key in that because we can see that data live and then go in and address those issues and then actually have those conversations and educate folks on trauma-informed care, social emotional learning. And it's not something that happens overnight. And sometimes, you know, we constantly have to have those conversations. I think the most important thing we have to do is have the conversation and call a thing and looking at the data and saying, here's what it is, and going from there.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. This is Thomas. Nicole, I don't want to break your rhythm, but can you give our folks a very brief description of the equity dashboard, particularly focusing on the importance of it being almost 95% real-time data, and how our soon-to-be active equity playbook will provide strategies to address some of the issues. I think it was Ms. Martin raised about discipline, and perhaps when we talk about discipline, disproportionality, and how we can have some research-based strategies to address those disproportionalities as it relates to discipline or academics.
Okay, so remember when I'm a visual person, so I had to flip back to my PowerPoint so I could see the screen that I showed you that said the academic proficiencies, and you saw all of our Black, Hispanic, Native students that were in orange when we looked at the academics. And I said, what do we see in the trends? This data is live. It comes from Infinite Campus. As they put in information, you can click on it and it shows you the data, the numbers, what that represents. Then you can go and you can do your problem solving analysis and going from there and figuring out what the 5 whys are. And then the equity walks. One of the things I love about the equity walk, it does not just have to be teachers. It can be students. It could be your community folks that you're working in, because everybody has a different lens when we look at this data. When we take the data and we create this equity toolkit that has the multi-tiered approach to it, where we're going to give you strategies to address that. And when it comes to particular reading, there are going to be resources out there that you can look at to say, okay, we have students with 2 or more races that are struggling with reading. How can we help them? Our toolkit will be able to provide you live resources on how to address that different ways. It's not going to be just, here's one way to do it. It's going to be multiple ways to address that issue when it comes to reading. So that's the one thing that I love about the equity dashboard. You have to work with your district where you're working with so you can see this data to figure out what the issues are. And again, it looks at academic and non-academic barriers. So we talked about homelessness as one of the key areas that they look at. How is that impacting the students? Are the homeless students having, are they overrepresented in their academics? Because a lot of times homeless students, they're transient. They move quite often. So of course that will affect their academics. So once we start looking at the 5 whys, why are they moving so often? How can we help them? How can we help provide resources for them academically as well? How can we help move them in their benchmarks? Dr. Woods-Tucker, I don't know if I answered that question with fidelity. Okay.
You nailed it.
Okay.
Again, with the emphasis being how these various tools will work together and ensuring that people really have an understanding of these tools and how these tools work together to ensure students and staff members are possible.
Mr. Darnell, I believe you had your hand up.
I've been trying to get through. That's okay. It's all right. Can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, just checking since I'm in Sauer, but just for the scope, I guess, of this particular advisory council and the focus on gifted and talented education, and then the priority statement that we just referenced at the beginning of the meeting, to remove barriers for equal opportunity. We would be disingenuous if we did not acknowledge, just the significant disparity in representation within gifted and talented programs and access to, we just talked about AP exams. So the lack of diversity within those courses and that coursework. So I guess just within the scope of this particular council, I just think it's really relevant to seek the data as far as, the equity dashboard goes in terms of access. And, this is should be a great cause for us to be monitoring and looking for and finding means of having a larger conversation about how we broaden this access to all students, but particularly underrepresented students historically.
Absolutely. And I would say as a parent, my son is labeled as gifted. And I remember that process, and he had a phenomenal counselor in elementary who believed in not testing who the teacher recommended, but giving everybody the opportunity to test. And he tested gifted, and we knew that he was gifted. His mom, his dad, we knew it, but it was great that that person and the people in school felt that everyone should be tested. And I was elementary, middle, and a high school counselor. So one of the things that I did push was that it's not just one particular student, it's all students. So we should give them all the opportunities that we provide for everyone. Everyone should be able to test and see. And then gifted is not just in one category. You can be gifted in an abundance of categories, and really trying to make sure that another piece of that is making sure that parents understand what that means. And that meant that we were having family nights and having families in and bringing folks in to help explain that. And if you had forums like this and you had parents that had questions and you wanted to host an event, I'd be more than happy to come and explain to them why it's important that their students have that access, and why that we want to make sure that we give it to everyone, that they have the opportunity to test for gifted and talented AP. So yes, we should be doing that work. And the equity dashboard is a key component that in this group that you can monitor that and see where the gaps are. And that gives you an opportunity to kind of go in and to push for more students to get labeled as gifted and talented.
And I would want you to know that we've been talking about universal screening for quite a while. And I appreciate you helping us get the word out that every student needs the opportunity to be assessed, because we cannot depend upon teacher nominations. That's a barrier in many
Absolutely.
places.
Absolutely.
I don't think the situation is good, and I'm not trying to say that, but when Susan Weston Perkins looked at those data not too long ago, within the last few months, she wrote a blog for the Pritchard Committee that the data looked better than we expected them to during the pandemic, that the underrepresented groups really had improved in numbers. Do I think that's solving the problem? No, that's not at all what I mean. But I do mean that there was progress, and that blog was pretty encouraging in terms of a direction to go. Not that we've arrived, we have so much work to do, and we're very aware of it.
Dr. Roberts,
Yes.
this is Jean Lee in Harlan County, and you had mentioned universal screeners, and I had a question relating to social emotional learning. I know that social emotional issues, along with trauma, can often mask giftedness, especially in marginalized populations. And thinking about a multiple tiered system of support and screenings, I'm wondering if Dr. Fields has any recommendations, or if there's been any work done around social emotional screeners that can help pinpoint or point out students who may potentially be gifted, but that giftedness is being masked because of some sort of social emotional or trauma issue, or if there's any tools out there that would help in uncovering those gifted students that may be having discipline problems, or may be homeless, or may be having other social emotional learning issues.
I will say there are a number of SEL tools that are out there that can help identify. On top of my head, I cannot name, like, go get this. So, but there are resources out there. And I'm writing your question down so I can follow up with you, and I will put it back in this chat, because I know once the meeting's over, you can go back and put comments in there. But I'm writing that question down so I can follow up, because right now I can't think of just one tool that you can utilize to identify that could be used to help you with students that are having misbehaviors or homelessness or whatever, so you can recognize if it's been hindered, if their giftedness has been hindered because of that. So I'll get back with that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'd like to ask a question, Dr. Fields. This is Pauline Covington, and I actually, I'm from Fayette County. I represent middle school teachers. And what I wanted to ask is, first of all, I think Infinite Campus is a very robust tool. And as a teacher coach in my building, I have to admit that it is a very overwhelming tool. And I worry, or I am aware that, as a practitioner, it is, I want to look at the data, and I want to tease out the qualitative data. But I would like to either maybe suggest that there is an easy way for us as teachers and counselors to access the equity dashboard. I'm looking at Infinite Campus right now, and I have a lot of access to it, but I just as a user, I would love to see something that is easily accessible for those who are allowed to see this equity dashboard.
And I have to say that you have to be careful with the data that who has access to this, because you can get to a lot of information that how can I best say this? As a counselor, I had privy to data that my teachers did not, and I was able to see. There's a tab called Counselor Comments, and I can see like a lot of detailed stuff that has happened to students that we do not want people to take that information and to use that against a student, or, you know, sometimes it's not always best that you have some of that back knowledge. So we have to be very careful about who has access to what, because it does give you a lot of information to students. I will say that the folks that have access to the equity dashboard, again, I would say work with your districts with that particular person to see how you can, how they can help you with that information of what particular you're trying to see, whether you're looking at, did you say you were a teacher? So if you were a math teacher, you were looking at some of the math gaps, you know, particularly working whoever it is within that building who has access to it, saying, you know, what were we looking at, how to dig deep into that data. You don't necessarily have to have, because it gives you so much information in that equity dashboard. And it pulls a lot of information that not all teachers have access to. So I just say we have to just be really careful on who has access to the data to protect our students. But there are the folks that have it. I think if you work closely with them, you two can work together to get the information that you need to ensure that you are providing an equitable opportunity and access to change whatever you need to do to make it better.
Understood. I appreciate that. And I'm not necessarily saying that I want the access, because there is a lot of information that I don't need to know as a teacher. But I do, it's clear, it's been clarified that I know to work with our guidance counselor, our buildings guidance counselor. Thank you.
Dr. Fields, you are awesome. This presentation is so good. And as you can tell, the conversation and questions bring life and just inquisitiveness and passion. And so we're so thankful that you were able to provide this presentation. Can you make sure I get your PowerPoint presentation, and I will share that and the link with
Yes, I send it to your email, but I also can resend if you need me to. I was trying to answer some of these questions in the chat. Okay.
There are a lot of questions in the chat, and we do have another speaker who is here, and Kathy has recommended that we possibly take a 5-minute break. Is that okay, Sarah, before your presentation? But feel free to direct questions to Dr. Fields as well. And if you would like to send those through me and Kathy, we will make sure we coordinate with her. But this is such a refreshing presentation. And so people are excited. So it's fun. Thank you so much for being with us.
And I just want to say this, as a previous counselor, we are school counselors and not guidance counselors. So just so everybody knows that we're school counselors. Thank you again for allowing me to come speak to you this morning.
Thanks so much. Just take a break. Be back about 10:21, and Sarah Snipes is going to share an update on local laboratories of learning. Thank you. Ready to begin, and Sarah Snipes is with us, and she's going to provide a presentation on the local laboratories of learning, and a quick way to refer to that is the L3s. So, go ahead. Thank you, Sarah.
Great.
Welcome.
Good morning. Can you all hear me okay?
Can everyone hear Sarah okay?
Yes, a little muffled, but.
Okay, I'll try to speak up. I'll use my teacher voice this morning. So good morning. I'm Sarah Snipes. I'm our program manager within the Division of Innovative Learning here at the Department of Education. In my roles, I manage our Innovative Learning Network, which has about 37 districts across the state who engage in the progressive conversations around innovative strategies and initiatives. And we also are working on the projects that, aside from the L3s right now, working with project-based learning, and we are also exploring student micro-credentialing and badging in addition to teacher opportunities to earn micro-credentials. So a lot of exciting
work being done in our division. We like to say that we play in the sandbox a lot to think outside of the box, if you will, about what's possible with education here in our state. And I was sharing earlier, I always love to follow Nicole in these conversations because I think that's a true testament to what I'm going to share with you today. A lot of the efforts across the agency here that we've really been working on, especially since Dr. Glass joined us, to really make sure that these efforts spread across KDE. There's a lot of consistency in our efforts. And so I hope that you'll see a lot of connections to what Nicole shared and what we're doing on the ground with our L3s to really transform the assessment system here. So a few guiding questions for us today. I hope that the answer for you are our L3s and how is their work related to our United We Learn initiative. Also, what trends exist in the assessment accountability prototypes that our local communities are developing? And then what are communities learning about inclusive design process? So some buzzwords for your day. Inclusion is obviously going to show up here in our conversation as a real anchor to the work that we're doing in our local communities. Just to give you some background about United We Learn, if you've not heard about this promise to the state of Kentucky, you will likely be hearing more and more about it over the next several years. This began with KDE's equity resolution back in 2019, a charge from Chair Young. She really charged us with thinking innovatively and differently and stating that, quite frankly, the traditional systems and measures that we use are not working for each and every learner in the state. So how do we take that charge and really act upon it to make sure that we do indeed change outcomes and student experiences across the state? So in the spring of 2021, shortly after joining us, Commissioner Glass led a listening tour. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, that needed to be virtual, but regardless, we still had 11 virtual sessions across the state that welcomed over 1,000 Kentuckians to share openly their stories and experience in our education system. We did not necessarily reach out to folks to hear what they would suggest for improvement. We simply wanted to gather their stories. How have you experienced education in our state, and what's your vision for the future? From those listening tours, we developed the Kentucky Coalition for Advancing Education. That group, I see Bryn with us today. She's a member of that group. Really came together from that inclusive lens. We put out open applications across the Commonwealth to say, do you want to be a part of shaping the future of education in Kentucky? It doesn't matter what walk of life you're from, what role you serve in your community. We welcome any and all to join this group. What that group did was come together over a series of sessions, including last summer, and they took all of that data that was collected from the listening tours as well as empathy interviews. They went out into their local communities and conducted empathy interviews one-on-one with folks to continue that conversation about their learning experiences. And they wrote the Kentucky United We Learn report, which I have here as a hard copy, but at the end of my presentation, I'll throw a QR code up on the screen so you're able to grab that off your phone. It's a quick KDE web search as well. If you type in United We Learn, you'll see that report. This group, what I love to share about this report is that it's not KDE written. There were no necessarily technical experts writing this report. This is by Kentuckians for Kentuckians. It gives credit in the back to all the members of that coalition. And this includes an overview of the work, but also it gives us two important pieces that came from this data. One are 10 Commonwealth themes. So we outlined what are 10 themes of experiences that people are saying our current system is like here in Kentucky. And then reflected from that are the 10 vision statements. How do we transition to that future that Kentuckians themselves have said they wanted out of our education system? Again, that's not a guess. That's not KDE coming up with those visions. That is what Kentuckians have told us they want. And so from there, we developed user profiles. So in this report, you'll see a series of user profiles that I think may be of interest of this group. I would love just to hear feedback if you get time to dive into this, if you see yourselves or folks that you know in the roles that you serve reflected in these profiles. Of course, we can't take each and every Kentuckian and write a report about them as an individual, but what the coalition hoped to do was take the data from those empathy interviews and really craft a portrait of different Kentuckians in their roles. So we have various student profiles developed, educators, district leaders, parents, and community members that we hope everyone will be able to see themselves in one of these profiles or multiple. And so from this report, we led the Kentucky Education Summit, the first of that event last fall. And just a tremendous 2 days of coming together, again, open to any and all stakeholders across the state that wanted to rally and learn more about this work and coming together in hopes of shaping what the future of education here in our state can look like. So after that launch at the Education Summit in the fall, we also officially publicly launched our local laboratories of learning. And so if you think about the L3s, they're kind of the vehicle on the ground that bridges that current state to the future state where we hope to be. They're the local communities piloting new assessment, accountability, and learning experience approaches who are informing the coalition, as well as KDE and KDE, about where we should go next. So you have the folks on the ground driving the work, they're informing us. Right, so it's really a flip from that top-down approach that we've done in the past of how our system should be. So our L3s, understanding that opportunity, if an L3 community gets to forge deeper connections with their community. At the end of the day, we hope to make some significant changes in our structures, but we know that just in doing this work in these pilots, our districts and their communities will form inclusive coalitions. They'll work together, they'll build trust, and they'll strengthen habits of empathy, co-creation, inclusion, and reciprocity. Those are 4 habits of practice we really anchor our work around. And then, of course, the big picture hope here as well is to shape Kentucky's next assessment accountability system. Through our L3s, they're working to co-create new approaches using a design thinking process. And they're hoping to influence policy at the state and federal level. We hope to have some soft recommendations in 2023 session with some really solid policy recommendations for 2024 from their work. The good stuff is, who are these local laboratories of learning? Our first 2 cohorts are currently underway. Cohort 1 launched in fall of 2021. Those are Allen, Fleming, Frankfort Independent, Jefferson, Johnson, Logan, and Shelby. We also have cohort 2, which is currently in their launching phase, Berea Independent, who I'll be actually going to see after this meeting today for their first session, Boone County, Bullitt, Corbin Independent, Greenup, and Lawrence. And those 2 groups I just point out were originally members of our Kentucky Innovative Learning Network, which I mentioned in my intro. And really, we were pushed from districts across the state to say, we also want in this, right? Which is all that we could hope for. So for cohort 3, which has just been identified, and they'll be launching in the fall, Carter, Floyd, LaRue, Rowan, Warren, and Washington, they actually were part of our first statewide recruitment effort and open application. So those districts had not previously engaged in some of our Innovative Learning Network initiatives, but we are so excited that they raised their hands that we want into this important work. As I mentioned, inclusive local coalitions drive the design. I think to what Nicole spoke to earlier, we want to do this differently because we hope that we have a different outcome than what we've previously had in the past. And so, like the Kentucky Coalition, each of those local communities on the last screen go out and they recruit in 3 different ways. They have direct recruitment, so about 10 individuals on their team who they actively go out and seek out for whatever reason from different roles in their community. We also encourage them to put out an open application to anyone in their community, and then do community sampling, which I think is a great opportunity for us to encourage districts to use the equity dashboard and other resources that are available, look into their infinite campus data systems, identify specific populations that have traditionally been marginalized or underrepresented in those decision-making spaces, and reach out to them with intention to recruit and create that space of belonging on that local design team. So our L3s with 3 cohorts are always kind of going through the design cycle at different stages. At the top there, you see the design thinking process going through phases of empathy, defining, ideation, prototype, and testing. So our cohort 1 members have gone through this process. They have formed local coalitions. They conducted their own empathy interviews. They analyzed that data from their local community and went back to those user profiles and really tweaked and refined them to fit their local context. And then from there, they created a problem statement, something that they see as a problem within their community around education. They came together in an inclusive team to brainstorm possible solutions to that education problem. And they selected an idea they'd like to prototype. And so over the last several weeks, they have developed a user experience prototype. So for many of them, that's students, but for some, it's they're members of their community. What are they going to experience as part of this prototype? And they've been in the process of getting feedback. So imagine they've gone out, they've recruited this diverse community coalition. Those folks have been hands-on in designing the experience, and now they're going back out to members that may not have been direct participants in the process to say, how would this work for you? If we're wildly successful, what will come from this? If it fails miserably, what will happen to you in your role in this community? And how can we improve this idea? And so through surveys and interviews, they're refining their prototypes and preparing to plan for some implementation and piloting in their districts. So cohort 1 has gone through that process, and cohort 2, as I mentioned, are just in the phases of finalizing their coalitions, and they're starting to conduct those empathy interviews to learn more about the members of their community. Some examples of those first cohort 1 prototypes. Allen County, with their communities, has determined that they'd like to design a student experience that includes student defenses of learning, and they want to align that with their emerging graduate profile work. Logan County is developing a dashboard to display student successful attainments of profile competencies, but also academic success, participation in internships, extracurricular activities, so possibly leaning into that world of micro-credentialing for students. Shelby County is developing a plan to engage every stakeholder in understanding their profile of a graduate and what it means to students, families, employers, and post-secondary institutions. Johnson County is changing the way students explore career pathways and attain certification through a development of a digital portfolio. Frankfort Independent is working to develop project-based capstone experiences aligned with the graduate profile, and they're implementing a competency-based report card, piloting at the 5th grade level this year. Jefferson County is refining their backpack of success skills and want to include more personalized opportunities for all students across grade levels to demonstrate life skills and show mastery standards in flexible ways. And then Fleming County is refining their bridge performance indicators aligned with the profile of the graduate and their measures of quality dashboards. And they're developing communication and stakeholder engagement plans. So in January, the Kentucky Coalition met, and they have met once since just a few weeks ago, actually. But in that January meeting, we asked the coalition members in an advisory role to really look for patterns after our L3s provided an update in their prototype development. And so the KCIE members really I pulled some high-level trends to our attention. In the report, the United We Learn report, a lot of our communities prioritize Commonwealth Theme 9 to make assessments go beyond a snapshot of a whole child and reflect what communities need to do to cultivate learning. That was a kind of a hot spot that a lot of communities wanted to focus on. Many are expanding or refining some level of redesign of something that they're already doing well in their school system. They just want to see it elevated and create structures with a new focus for stakeholder involvement. Prototypes are currently focused on a student learning experience, but we're supporting our design team now is transitioning to support these communities as they think about that accountability model. What kind of data sources will we use, and how will that inform our stakeholders of if our prototype is meeting the needs and the outcomes that we hope to achieve. All teams seem to want to build trust in their community and improve how they communicate local systems of accountability. Portrait of a graduate is very common in our first cohort. There's a few reasons for that. I had several phone calls as we were recruiting our third cohort, whether or not POG needed to be a requirement to participate in L3s. I assured them it did not. It happens to be a trend with our first cohort because many of them were participants in our division competency education consortium that happened a few years ago. So a lot of them had already been involved in that work, and it's been influential in their district. The current size and weight of the state assessment system is competing for time and attention with these prototypes. Our local communities say this is what matters to us. This is important and valuable to our students, our stakeholders, our families, our teachers. But we're still over here held accountable to something else that's holding us back from some real potential. So trying to find how to weigh and balance those things with these prototypes. Again, kind of leaning back into Nicole's conversation, we're constantly asking these district and community co-leads to reflect on those habits. And recently we asked them to reflect, how has this process impacted your perspective on inclusive design, bringing a diverse group of stakeholders in to co-create with you? And Shelby County reflected that it's been a lot about relational trust. They know they can't move forward without building that solid foundation of trust with all stakeholders, reciprocal partnerships between family, community members, and schools. In Johnson, they relied through this process on many different groups, educators, students, community members, parents, and every single one has appreciated being involved in the process that has been so important to their schools and community. In Allen County, they're hearing voices from perspectives they rarely hear from in the past and might not have considered how that would help them see things on a larger scale. And then Frankfurt Independent reflected that they want education to be meaningful for their students, and this process has acknowledged that stakeholders know exactly what that looks like for the students in their community. So again, a few ways that the L3s are shaping the future of education here in Kentucky. These leads, the leaders of those teams, they have a district leader, but also someone out in their community. So for example, a new group that has joined us, Rowan County, is partnering with someone from Morehead State University to help lead this work as a community co-lead. L3s gather in a community of practice each month, and those leads share learning about this process. Just a professional learning space, a vulnerable space for them to share their dilemmas, their successes, but also build capacity in facilitating local design sessions. L3s also meet with that Kentucky Coalition for Advancing Education, and they provide those updates about prototypes and learning. And so, again, the L3s are on the ground developing the prototypes. The KCAE is kind of an advising group that provides support to them, but also informs KDE and KBE about the implications of their learning. The KCAE also identifies trends, as I mentioned, and serve as champions for this work, and they will start to craft those policy implications with us as well. And the L3s really work to seek feedback from their stakeholders. One thing that I wanted to make sure I mentioned to this group is we're in a great space, especially in cohort 2. If you are part of those communities or you have connections with some of these communities, really, it should be seen as an open door opportunity to engage. That's the point of those inclusive coalitions. Many of you may have thought, oh yeah, I remember seeing that open application sent out in our community, or I saw about that on Facebook, or heard about it from another means. But if you've not yet found a way to engage in those conversations, contact me, reach out to that point of contact in your community, because we need parent representatives, teacher representatives, and we hope that in these inclusive teams, we have stakeholders who are involved in the creation itself, but also if they can't engage in the local coalitions, at least are part of the feedback loops to refine those prototypes and give some insight to their needs. So I feel like that's a lot, but as I mentioned, there's a QR code there on the screen that will take you to our United We Learn report. That is something that's helping to shape our strategic planning even here within KDE. So it is truly a driving force for a lot of the work that we will do from here on out. But if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Are there comments or questions from the group?
I will make sure you get the presentation, along with a presentation from Dr. Fields. Really appreciate Sarah sharing this information. And again, that has a QR code at the end for that United We Learn. Any questions for?
I think it's such important work you're doing. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Sarah. It's nice. That was wonderful. So many good ideas, and it sounds like some good innovation going on there. And I'm sorry if you said this. I know you covered a lot of information, but I'm just curious. What are going to be some of the measurement pieces in place to determine how effective these prototypes are going to turn out to be?
That's a great question, Brendan. I unfortunately can't speak too much to that because our teams throughout this next month are actually going to be the ones determining that themselves. So again, kind of going back to that, this is not a top-down approach. Those teams are the ones determining what data points they hope to use through their prototype in designing that local accountability model that fits within that student or that community experience. So we have partners at the Center for Assessment, the Center for Innovation and Education, and then some internal folks as well who are supporting that work. So we definitely want to make sure they do have some technical expertise to assist them through that process. But these teams, Bren, will be meeting over the next month to determine what data points they hope to use and align those to make sure that they provide the information of whether or not those prototypes are yielding the results and outcomes that they hope for in their community as it aligns with their priority themes. So.
I have a question. This is Pauline Covington in person. Is what you are doing with L3 speaking to potentially change what we used to know as K-Prep?
So we are addressing the assessment accountability structure. We know that communities like Shelby County, who have created a very successful local model to measure competencies, both academic and non-academic. I'm sorry, non-academic, but they are building in academic competencies as well. In that community, that is valued very highly, right, to meet the needs of each and every learner. And to the conversation earlier, also respecting that the data that comes from the state testing system is also very valuable in achieving and giving information that our districts need to bring forward as well. So what this work is doing is hopefully informing policy implications around what we currently have in the state assessment system to rethink what that should look like. Of course, there are also federal requirements, but recently Kentucky has we've become interested in a federal grant opportunity that will also put a spotlight on this work to make sure that the federal system as well is looking at us as a potential model to rethink the federal level as well. So while here in Kentucky, unfortunately, we can help drive some of that local system, but we also know that we are also held accountable under a federal system. But we've created a structure that we hope will shine a spotlight on this work to get some conversations started to see that change as far as that we can push it.
Well, this meeting is getting better and better, I tell you. Thank you so much.
There comments?
Sorry, Dr. Roberts, go ahead.
I was just asking other comments or questions. If not, let me thank you so much for, oh, I think I heard someone.
This is Pauline again. I think this is the excitement in the teacher that's speaking right now. But to give you a sense for those non-educators in the building or counselors in the building, I do have to say that it's refreshing to hear the hope that KDE has for our education system. And I look forward to sharing this hope and excitement to my district because the morale is very, and if we can continue, I mean, even speaking on a personal level, I have to do things that will keep me involved and caring. And so I'm really proud to be part of this council, but at the same time, I'm finding a purpose again. And I appreciate that. And I think that my colleagues back home will appreciate that. And I can't speak enough about that. And so, I hope and pray that the momentum continues and that we can be that agent for change, not just for our Commonwealth, but for our nation. I look very forward to this.
And I think that speaks to our hope is that local community members across the state, over 3 cohorts, over 10 cohorts, however far this takes us, really see their footprint in what that future system looks like. Pauline, as a teacher in Fayette, should be able to see herself in that system that's designed by our local communities rather than coming from the top down.
Thank you for your comment, Pauline.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for the presentation. I'm sure we all learned something and have other questions that we'll be glad to follow up with. And your PowerPoint will be shared and we can go back and think about it again. Thank you very much. The next thing on the agenda for us is to kind of look at, okay, we're in advisory council, we've set priorities, so what? So let's kind of look at the priorities one by one and gather your suggestions of what is the advice we want to give on each of them. Number one, the priority statement is support identification practices that are equitable for students who are twice exceptional English learners, all racial and ethnic groups, all socioeconomic students, and students with special considerations that present barriers for opportunity and access. So what are your recommendations? We talked a little bit about universal screening and how important it is to get that word out in all districts. What other advice shall we send forward on priority statement 1?
This is Pauline again, in person. I think that in order to maintain the momentum of the work of Dr. Fields and Ms. Snipes, I think what I would recommend is that we continue supporting and encouraging these efforts. And however that may look, from the sound of it, from the look of it, I'm very much in favor of these initiatives. And I look forward to digging even deeper. So that is my recommendation, is to continue support of Dr. Fields and Ms. endeavors.
Thank you. What else?
This is Bryn Martin out of Northeastern Kentucky. I would like to see us maybe come up with a recommendation or some kind of outline or a rubric of some sort of what support looks like. What are we really suggesting in terms of, how they should identify the support needed, how to assess whether that support is sufficient. So I just think the word support really is so mushy, And a lot of people sometimes think they're providing support because they're doing X, Y, Z, but they may not realize they missed, A through X. And so I kind of think we need to better fine tune that with some specificity based upon, experience and research and that kind of thing.
Thank you.
Dr.
What
Roberts?
other,
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, Dr. Roberts?
who else has recommendations?
This is Jean Lee again from Harlan, Kentucky. I have no idea if what I'm about to say is even possible from this committee, but I'm looking at the last part of priority statement 1 where it says remove barriers for equal opportunity and access. And it's my understanding that the regulation that we go by in gifted education has not been reviewed or revised in some years. And I would like to see KDE look at or ask for a review of our regulation through the lens of barriers that might prevent an equal opportunity and access, to see if there's any language within the regulation that might offer or cause a barrier to opportunity and access to be there, and if so, revise or remove that language.
Thank you, Jean. Other recommendations?
I agree with that, Jean. That was also one of my concerns. I think we need to go deeper into a better identifying what barriers look like specifically for different groups of people, and coming up with maybe some ways of addressing those.
Others?
Well, going back to,
Yes.
can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Going back to one of the first meetings that we had, looking at the statistics from all of the school districts in the state of Kentucky as far as distribution of gifted and talented students, and we have some that are extremely high as far as the identification of gifted and talented students, and then we have others that there's obviously a disparity there. I mean, we don't have school districts that have nearly 30% of their students that are gifted and talented, and others that have 5%. So I think some way of a standardization in that process would be great, and also identifying what are outliers and why do the outliers exist? Why are there some school districts that are so high as far as their identification? Why are there some school districts that are so low? And are there any equity issues that are causing those disparities?
Excellent.
That's similar to kind of what I put in the chat. Sorry, this is Brandy Corbin. And kind of thinking in what we've heard today, so much of what we heard today around the work of equity and the L3s has been very inspiring. And I feel like a lot of how the only real concrete measure we have for identifying gifted and talented students is still very much relying on a test, that kids take some kind of a test and that they are identified in that way. Although I know that is changing across school districts, it's still very much the only concrete indicator we have. So in the spirit of the idea of new prototypes for accountability, it probably would be something that this committee could do to develop some indicators that are a little more concrete for school districts to determine gifted and talentedness in a variety of ways that are, kind of line up with these prototypes that are being developed in different counties through the work of the Office of Innovative Learning.
Excellent.
Well, let's look at priority statement number 2. Communicate and provide guidance to school districts and families that assessment accommodations must be provided to students who have an individual education plan or a 504 plan. How do you suggest that that guidance be clarified?
Hi, this is Hannah England, and priority statement number 2, I think, was one of the questions that I had asked when we first met, because this was an issue that personally in my district that we dealt with this year. And I know with my colleague and I, when we were looking at this and when this arose, just more clarification of how to handle it. I think when you go to the regulations, it might not be exactly specified as to what to do. Like because like we kind of were asking just whenever our students take the MAP assessment, do students with an IEP still get their accommodations? And then when you're looking at a true general intellect, should they receive accommodations for that if you're truly looking for an IQ statement? Or the score. And so this was a concern that we had, because we just had issues on how to make sure that was in place. And then not only but then the students with ESL, like we offered them students to take the gifted assessment in their native language, and some of them chose not to, because even though they could speak it, they were not able to read it as well as English. So we just kind of struggled in making sure, we wanted to make sure that, everyone was on a playing field that was that would offer them the best opportunity for success.
And Hannah, do you feel like that's been clarified? And if not, what advice could we provide?
Well, that's a great question, because I think I might even refer to my colleague and asking her with this question, because when we look to the regulations, I can't recall specifically how to handle it. And I know that whenever we had met with some of our GT coordinators meetings, it was encouraged that yes, you would need to provide accommodations. But then we had an issue to say we had a student that that was a learning disability, I think it was, Susie, I cannot read, in a specific, like say reading, for instance, but yet he was also taking the gifted test in reading. Is that how it was? And so we didn't know, should you still provide, even though his IEP required, say maybe accommodations for a reader, but yet he had also showed up on his map, how we look at it, to get receive that reading test to see if he qualified for gifted. And so we didn't know in that scenario if he should receive a accommodations or not, since you're looking specifically for, say, gifted in reading. So that was the question. And I'm sorry, it's been about 6 months since that had happened, but that was just, I thought if more concern and continuity across districts would help, because I'm sure if I'm not the only district that's going through this, but just some clarification, I guess.
Hannah, am I hearing you correctly that you're really thinking that since the regulation, which is in writing, doesn't specify that, perhaps something in writing as guidance to district would be useful, so that there would be consistency of state?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
That's very eloquently said. Yes, thank you.
Is there other advice relating to the second priority? Then let's look at priority statement 3. Trying to get something to remove so it doesn't cover up part of my 3, which actually just disappeared. Can someone read priority 3 that has it readily available? Mine just vanished.
I recommend that the KDE contact districts to highlight the importance of social emotional learning needs of our gifted students and gather resources that various role groups such as school psychologists, counselors, teachers, and parents can use to address the needs of students. And this category is social emotional support for gifted and talented students.
Thank you, Joe. Recommendations related to the 3rd priority.
Perhaps there we can add clarification, not only to provide resources, but also we suggest they also provide training in using some of those resources and, trying to simplify that process a bit, especially for parents who might not be experts.
Thank you, Bren. Other suggestions?
I raised my digital hand, Dr. Julia, but maybe you can't
Oh,
see it.
no.
This is Kirk Haynes. So as a local school board member, I would like to see KDE reach out. Currently, the Kentucky School Boards Association, KSBA, is the only approved provider of training to school board members. But as of right now, there are no sessions specific to social emotional learning, nor are there any training sessions offered to school board members related to gifted and talented education. And so I think that would be powerful because it reaches school board members at our annual conference and our winter symposium. And it gives school board members who have an interest in gifted and talented education opportunity to find out more. And it creates a stronger partnership with the Kentucky School Boards Association.
Kirk, you're almost right. Mary Evans, Tracy Inman, and I are part of the equity cadre for KSBA, and we do a session, but we're not always called upon to do that session on equity and gifted education, but that is the exception.
All right.
Yes.
Well, thank you for correcting me, and I'll do some advocating inside that organization.
And I think what you're suggesting is so important. We could do way more than that. Yes. Any other advice on social emotional, the 3rd priority?
I don't have them all right in front of me, but we also need to suggest they do have a better process for identifying socio-emotional problems. And in a way that doesn't sound condemning or in a way that schools feel as though they're being penalized for having these problems. I think over the years, I think research has shown that a lot of times the schools that have some of the families or students or situations that need more attention, sometimes they feel as though maybe they're being held accountable for that, where they might not be the problem. You know what I mean? So I think we need some way to alleviate any penalties that some schools or leaders might feel as though they are being imposed because they do have these challenges. I think we need some way of not only, identifying those problems, but also identifying ways that we can make sure that it's being factored in when we look at the results of assessments and trying to compare school to school. Did I say that clearly enough? Okay.
I thought you did. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like that was a major part of Dr. Fields' presentation, where she mentioned that really depends the context of situations that schools are in and their students are dealing with. But something that I think she brought up that was very important is just being a positive person out in the hallway, in the bathrooms, different places throughout the school, so that students are engaged. And so it may be that schools look at their culture, they look at their positive behavior intervention support type plans to really think about how are we looking for social emotional situations and talking with our students and being more of a positive force that is really being leadership driven to do that. So it may be that KDE communicates or recommends to schools or districts some resources on how you do that, because some educators are very good at that and some are not. And so that's just something that I feel like Dr. Fields' presentation hit on highly, and I appreciate that comment.
And I so agree with you. And I think sometimes it's just not thinking about what it takes to establish that culture that includes all kids. Yeah. Other advice related to priority 3?
This is Pauline Covington. I'm in person. I wonder if, and perhaps there are initiatives and courses in teacher preparation programs, like Dr. Roberts' program at Western, but are there courses for prospective teachers to take regarding SEL, especially with what's been happening these past couple of years, and also from my personal experiences, it sounds like SEL training, PBIS training is crucial for new teachers. As a new teacher years ago, when I taught the public schools, I didn't understand what positive behavior meant. And so because new teachers have so much thrown at them, I know that when I went through my building's orientation, I was told relationships are important. To me, that was the extent of it. But I didn't know what that looked like until 8 years later, until the pandemic happened, until I needed the support and the grace from my students so I could give it back to them. And so I would love to see higher ed take that and make that one of the priorities for teacher training, because I think that could really help alleviate attrition in the first few years of teaching.
What an important suggestion that is. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments on priority 3, social emotional learning? Well, thank you for taking the time and providing your suggestions, which is really the advice that an advisory council needs to be providing. And I thank you for all of those. Kathy, I think the next piece on the agenda is looking at future meetings.
Dr. Roberts, I
Before we
think
get too far, Dr. Roberts, I just wanted to also comment on how I appreciated working with some of you all on our initial meetings on the priorities. I know you and I, Kathy, and I think Jean Lee worked extensively in some sessions in helping to try to come up with a good foundation for those. And I appreciate the work the last members came up with in tweaking those. And so I just wanted to comment on that. And it's great to be back. And I just thank you all for all that you've been doing.
Thank you for that kind comment, Brown.
You're welcome.
yes, thank you, Fran. Dr. Roberts, I think we are at the gifted partnerships update.
Well, I was going to say that I have done some work with other organizations, but have not done that completely. Have worked with KSBA and with the superintendent's group, and both are very interested in moving on with this. I would have to say that, and I hope you all know that the budget for gifted education has gone up 3.8 million each year. It will be in each year's budget. So the gifted funding for next year will be 10 million, which is not as much as we would like. On the other hand, it is a boost we have not seen in a long time. And I would encourage you to thank your legislators for doing that. So that's kind of a slim report, but good news on the budget.
Yes, it is. It is good news. So thank you for that. All right. Well, what I tried to do was look at some dates, possible dates. Looked at the feedback from the last exit slip, and one of the council members, several council members, said that they felt like 2 meetings were not enough for us to complete the work. So I'm going to share my screen if that's all right with you.
Yeah.
All right. Let me get my future dates up here. And I'll see if I can share those with you. Give me just a second.
Spotlight, Kathy's.
Spotlight me. Good. Okay. You see those future meeting dates there?
Not very well. Just remember, I'm on my phone.
Second, I'll enlarge those. Oops. Not what I wanted to enlarge.
So Kathy wanted to propose that some of the meetings be virtual so that some of that subcommittee work that we don't have time for may be followed up on. And so you'll notice there are 3 virtual and our normal 2 in person.
Right. So I suggested Wednesday, July the 13th. Actually, I think that should probably be a virtual meeting. And then perhaps in September on the 15th, we have an in-person meeting. And I know that's something we want to talk about too, Joe, is do we want everybody to come in person? Do we still want to offer hybrid, that type of thing? There's been some discussion about how important it is to come in person if you can, because it helps us to have those conversations that are kind of difficult sometimes to have in a hybrid situation. Although I feel like today we've had a really, really good conversations in the hybrid world today. So those, of course, are decisions that will be made by you, the council. But then back to the suggested dates, Wednesday, November the 19th would be a virtual meeting. Then Wednesday, February the 1st, be a virtual meeting. And then Wednesday, April the 19th would be an in-person meeting.
Could I suggest that we consider making February 1st an in-person meeting? Because isn't that the month we usually do like advocacy at Frankfurt? And
Yep.
so, okay.
What about that too, Brennan? I just wondered about the weather. You never know lovely weather in Kentucky, so I thought maybe it might be, maybe we can have a hybrid, meeting that day, and those
Yeah.
people who could
Good
make
idea.
it
Good idea.
could come for the proclamation. Just so maybe I could just change that up there, and or maybe just change all of the meetings to hybrid. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
It is really so nice to have people there in person.
Yes.
Yeah, something that got feedback from folks on the exit slip, that they really wanted to move the work of the council forward, and they felt like we were spending a little bit too much time on just editing, and they were ready to do the work. And so in order to do that best, face-to-face on-site participation is the best way to do that. Now, the conversation and presentations today got to that level. That was the sweet spot, when you start really thinking about how are we coming up with some good action strategies to address our priorities. And so Kathy and I talked about that we feel like it's best if everyone plans to attend on site. However, you've got to be respectful for folks' plans and understand that that's difficult sometimes, and things come up, and we need time to do what we have, and we never have enough time to do that. So we felt like maybe a virtual and a on-site plan, and I like the idea of a hybrid, giving you an option. If there is bad weather, maybe we stay at home. If not, we come in. And so just want to give that charge to all of the members, that we would encourage you to be on site, yet we continue to be flexible, because we know that we all have needs that make that difficult at times. And that's kind of how we landed on the schedule.
And I would comment on two things. On my calendar, November the 19th is a Saturday.
Is it? I may have not looked at that correctly.
And my other comment is that when we meet in person, we can meet for a longer time and do more specific work on recommendations. So it's really nice to have everyone there in person. And I say that as I'm virtual for the first time ever, but.
We understand, Dr. Roberts. Believe me, we understand.
Well, I would definitely try to make the next ones in person. Could I just make a suggestion? I'm not sure what kind of budget we have, but when we're going to meet in person, especially if we're going to plan lengthier times, is there some way we could include lunch? I know, I guess we could bring our own lunch and do that, but it just seems fun if we could have, some sandwiches or subs or something where we kind of eat together, or that we could break into our little groups or what have you. But it just seems like having lunch is just such a nice addition, even if we chip in, to provide it. So.
Totally agree. I know the advisory groups that tend to set aside some time just to be able to talk and build relationships with one another seem to be much more effective. And it's just it's a nice opportunity to spend time with one another. So I would support that.
Thank you. Well, Kathy, thank you, and Joe, for putting forth these dates. We'll kind of move forward with those in mind. And I think that takes us to closing remarks. Is that right, Kathy?
Yes, ma'am, that is correct. That's correct.
Let me just talk about two or three things that are going on in Kentucky. Kathy has sent out to gifted coordinators a request from the National Research Center on the Gifted and Talented to have elementary schools participating in a research study that is looking at full grade and specific subject acceleration. And Dr. Del Siegle is director of the National Research Center. It's a wonderful opportunity for elementary schools to be involved in it. But like so many other things, if you don't hear about it, you don't do it. So we need help in spreading the word of opportunities that are available. Lots of decision makers are at the building and district level. So if you're interested in sharing that information in your district, please do. Another opportunity is one that we've initiated here at WKU, and that is for TIP Kentucky. It is replacing for Kentucky what Duke TIP provided when it was up and operating, but that's about a year and a half ago since Duke TIP closed. So we have above level assessment available for elementary children in grades 4, 5, and 6. And we have the opportunity for 13-year-olds and above to take the ACT as a part of TIP Kentucky. And that's really news that's hot off the press for the ACT part of it. Talent development is so important, and that's true for all children, including the underrepresented groups that we've talked about in priority number 1. But those children don't know about opportunities until someone tells them. And I would hope that each of you takes a role in ensuring that young people know about opportunities within your school districts, within your schools, but also that would be available through universities. And I suppose I'll ask you to cheer with me on the $10 million funding for Gifted. I think you all know that funding had really not gone up for Gifted Ed in 30 years. Inexcusable. So thank your legislators and begin to talk with them for the next budget session about this was a great step. And we need to continue to get the funding up to higher levels. Those are my closing remarks. We're kind of close to the end of the school year. I hope we do see each other in July, but I also hope we see each other before then. Joe, what about exit slip?
So I just placed the link to the exit slip in the chat for you. I will send that through email as well. And just remember, we encourage you to provide some feedback because Kathy and I go through that and we look at concerns and needs that you may have to help plan for the next meeting. We thank you for the feedback you provided the last meeting that helped us go through and then look at some areas that you felt like we needed to make improvements on or address. So if you can provide some feedback, that would be very helpful. And so our next meeting is virtual, right, Kathy? And it's, what was that date again? July the 13th, which will be a virtual session through Teams that Kathy and I will help coordinate. We will get you the presentations. Kathy and I are also working to make sure you have all the materials prior to the meeting. Kathy created the last couple meetings a Teams area for files. We have found that it works best to use a Google folder location. So when I send out the materials, I will send you that link to the Google folder for SACGTE specifically for your group. And you can click on that link and ask for access to that. Now, the only thing is, if you're aware of Google type tools, you need to have a Gmail address so that you can have access to that. So most people have that, but if you don't, Kathy and I can help coordinate. You just get a Gmail address and then it recognizes who you are, and then you have access to all the materials in a folder. So we'll provide that link for you. Thank you for your participation. And Dr. Roberts, you did fine using your phone today. Everything worked well. So thank you.
That's kind of funny, actually, but pretty small in the square in which I'm seeing you. But thank you. I'm so glad you're here.
All right, does anybody have any questions or concerns or anything before and don't forget the travel vouchers for those on site. Anything else from those virtually?
I just have a quick question. I'm sorry, this is Hannah. And I was wondering, if we are serving a 1-year term, do we continue to serve until we get kicked off?
And the answer to that is yes.
Yeah, okay, good. I'm excited to hear that because I've really enjoyed this opportunity. So I was kind of sad to see it come so quickly to an end, but that's good to hear. Thank you.
That's a good question. Kathy and I coordinate with Tracy Goff Herman in our office to review term membership. And of course, Tracy coordinates with our liaisons to reach out to the governor's office. And when they let us know of term changes, then we let you all know. But yes, the practice is you continue until you hear anything about it. Thanks for that question. That's a good question.
Okay.
Kirk Haynes, I'm making a
Motion to
motion.
adjourn. Dr. Roberts, do you want to ask for a motion to adjourn?
I think Kirk has a comment, and then I will.
Sorry,
Oh,
Kurt, go ahead,
Kirk
Kurt.
Haynes, I make a motion, we adjourn.
A second to the motion?
A second.
All those in favor? Do we call roll on this?
No, I think we're good.
Okay. All those in favor say
Aye.
aye.
Good day, everyone.
Thank you for participating, and let's make this advisory council matter. So let's get this advice moving forward. Thank you very much.